there's no perfect algorithm that can predict consumer demand 100%. There will be, some instances when our recommendations don't sell. The way they think about it is, are we on average increasing their probability of being right? As a founder, and especially in the early stage, you need to be extremely empirical, right? Everything that makes sense on a PowerPoint deck may or may not make sense in the real world, right? So there's only one way to find out, which is to experiment, right? So you need to be very empirical. You need to challenge all your assumptions, and then you need to do things that don't scale, right? As we were saying. In hindsight, being a very boring business is really a blessing in disguise, and that's because we don't have a lot of competitors, right? Imagine if I was building something in crypto back in 2021, right? There would be 200 other founders doing exactly the same thing. So being kind of the only one pursuing the boring idea gave us a little bit of that luxury to focus on building the right product, right? To try to really focus on the product market fit rather than compete with other players on the pricing.
Welcome to our podcast. Today, we are joined by Karl, founder and CEO of Sourcy.ai, the world's first prompt-to-product platform. Sourcy helps brands streamline the entire process from identifying the right product to manufacturing and shipping. In this conversation, Karl opens up about his journey, how he came up with the idea, his early successes and failures, and a moment where he had to borrow money from his wife to keep the company running. We also deep dive into 2 incidents that nearly cost him the entire business, the evolution of Sourcy, and their unique and fascinating hiring process. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube for more. Also, if you want to become a better founder by learning from founder and failed startup stories, don't forget to subscribe to my free newsletter. Check it out at therunway.ventures. With that, I bring you Karl Chan, the founder and CEO of Sourcy. Let's get into it. Okay, hey Karl, thanks so much for being here with us today, and welcome to the podcast. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, Admond.
Yeah, no worries, man. In fact, you are my second guest of our podcast, so super honored and excited to have you today to really learn more about your startup journey and also how Sourcy is solving some super interesting and quote-unquote boring problem that people always say, right, in this industry. So for those of you who are not aware, so Karl is the founder and CEO of Sourcy, an AI-powered platform to help brands and retailers source smarter and sell better, right? They are backed by top VCs in Europe and Asia, including Kapital Ventures and Foxmont, Capital Ventures, etc. Sourcy is the world's first, if I'm not wrong, right, the world's first prompt-to-product AI platform, and it's really recognized by Forbes and BCG and one of the top AI startups in Asia. There's so much to learn from Karl today, so super excited. But before we start, right, maybe Karl, could you maybe just share about your background, how you get started in your career, and basically your journey of building Sourcy, maybe from ground zero all the way until now. Yeah.
Absolutely. First off, thanks for having me again, and thanks for the very generous introduction. I think now the expectation is very high. Hopefully I can meet the expectation.
Come on, let's do it, yeah.
Let me start all the way from the beginning. Okay, so I'm from Hong Kong. I started my career in Hong Kong as well. So I used to work for this organization called Monitor Deloitte. Basically, Deloitte's strategy consulting arm after acquiring this consultancy called the Monitor Group. And then at the time, I was doing a lot of sourcing and supply chain projects for companies like McDonald's, Estée Lauder, Hasbro, and the like. Learned a lot about sourcing. I didn't expect I would finally go back to sourcing, but then after a few years in consulting, I just decided to kind of do something new. So I went to the US for my MBA, and I did my business school at the Wharton School, but I also did a very interesting dual degree from the Lauder Institute, which is also a part of UPenn. And they basically threw me to different parts of what they call emerging markets, right? Learn about how they're similar, how they're different, really inspire me to, learn a lot about international relations and trades and topics like that, which is particularly relevant, nowadays with all the tariff and things going on. And after graduation, right, then I just decided to take my career in that direction and join the IFC, which is the private investment arm of the World Bank. And then during that time, I was, focusing on B2B startups and things like that. And then I initially started in Washington, D.C., and then later on moved to Singapore with the company. And then when I moved to Singapore, I just identified this very interesting market gap, right, in product development and sourcing. And then, finally decided to jump to the other side of the table and started Sourcy. So what Sourcy does is really simple. As you said, like we're a prompt to product app, right? So think of us as an agentic sourcing platform that can turn a product idea into an actual product, right? So the way we do it is, once you have a product idea, right, we will go and scrape all the, social media and e-commerce insights for you. And then we will consolidate all these insights into different product features and different differentiation opportunities, right, that you can go after. And then we will then turn all these opportunities and features into a manufacturable product by basically translating a lot of these like features into languages that the factories would be able to understand, right? And then after that, we will have our factory partners make the product and ship the product to you so that you can go to market faster than everyone and basically enjoy a first mover advantage, right? So that's what we do here at Sourcy.
Oh, this is really interesting. It means you are basically providing, like full end-to-end sourcing service. You don't just source, you actually manufacture the product and send to the, whatever brands that's using, right?
From ideation to, realization, right, of the actual product. So that's what we do.
Wow. Okay. And okay, just off my head now, like how does Trump's tariff affect Sourcy's business? Because, my assumption is you're going to source from different parts of the world, suppliers, talk to manufacturers and all this. And with this introduction of tariffs just, I guess 1 or 2 days ago by our President Trump, how does it affect the business or does it affect it at all?
Yeah, I think it's a bit too early to tell.
Okay.
The very early sign that we see is, if anything, it might be a positive thing for Sourcy. And the main reason for that is, if you kind of follow the e-commerce sector, right? A lot of these sellers on Amazon or on Shopify, they used to use this like drop shipping model. So meaning they find a manufacturer in China and then they directly list the product on their site and then sell the product to the consumer. Usually for this type of business model, the only kind of like value proposition is the cost, right? So like you're trying to basically compete with the other sellers on the pricing, and then you want to be the cheapest kind of provider, right, on the market for your category. But with the tariff coming in, right, it makes this strategy very, very difficult to execute because at the end of the day, you need to budget in another 20-30% of tariff, right, that you can hopefully pass to your consumer. So now a lot of these sellers are changing from a drop shipping model to a more differentiation model, right? Meaning they want to develop their own private label brand with a differentiated, unique product. And then in order to do that, they need a solution, kind of like Sourcy, right? So hopefully, at least based on the, traction that we're getting, it seems like we actually get even more leads, since the announcement of the tariff. But then, it's a little bit too early to tell. So let's talk again in 2 weeks and see if I'm still, smiling with a happy face.
Well, I guess it's a good opportunity, right? Instead of competing with price nowadays, especially as you said, drop shippers, they have to really, really up their game, right? Really have some differentiated products. And it's really time consuming, right? To just go and source all the features, problems and stuff like that. And then come up with a differentiated product. Actually, I tried on your website earlier just to try out the agent, right? And I just typed, pickleball stuff and I waited for like 1 or 2 minutes. And it really gave a very, very comprehensive response. Not just, the features, but really the opportunities, the gap that the market is missing that I can potentially, build a product to solve the gap. And the data where you are getting, all the social data and all these e-commerce site. I think this is really interesting and to be honest, a bit mind-blowing as well because I think this really disrupts a lot of things and makes the whole sourcing and the maybe even manufacturing process so much more efficient and easy, man. Yeah. And
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks for trying it out, by the way.
no worries, man. I was like trying out, playing on the website and see, oh, yeah, maybe I can try this chatbot and see how it goes, right? It's cool. It's cool. It gives some sense of a wow factor when I first tried it. Just to
Thank
let you
you,
know,
bro.
yeah. But let's rewind this right to the very beginning. What was the aha moment that made you say, hey, I'm gonna build Sourcy, because you talk about when you came to Singapore and then you saw the gap. That sourcing process is really, really inefficient. So I think the question is, what really led you to start Sourcy, and what exactly is the problem that you're trying to solve here?
As I was mentioning, I used to focus a lot on B2B marketplaces, B2B commerce, and business models. And then, I remember back then I was working on a deal in the Philippines into this, I would say, even today, right, the most successful B2B commerce startup. And when I was doing the due diligence, though, right, I was talking to some of the buyers on their platform. And I asked them, this platform seems to be pretty amazing. It can serve a lot of your pain points. Are there still some pain points that you have that this solution that we were looking at was not able to solve, right? And then consistently, all the buyers that I talked to mentioned is about product selection, product curation, product merchandising, right? So like a lot of these, I guess first gen type of B2B platforms, they really focus on the fulfillment. Right? So if you already know exactly what you want, they can help you secure the product at the lowest cost possible. But what if you don't know exactly what you should be sourcing, right? Then you will probably have to go to another tool, do a lot of research on a lot of these platforms like Helium 10, Jungle Scout, learn a lot about the consumer behavior, and then turn around and then go back to the sourcing site. Hopefully you can find the right product, right? I realized this is just a very disjoint and inefficient process for a lot of the buyers. So after I heard that from the buyers, right, I just did a little bit of research myself. I realized there's no such one today that can really help you consolidate product insights, turn it into a product spec, and then have the product sourced, right? And then I just decided that maybe it would be a very big market opportunity. So after doing some research, doing some, I would say experimentation, I just decided to, jump right into it and started sourcing.
Wow, wait, let's dive deeper into that. How do you even validate that this is actually, a real problem that people actually want to buy, right? People can say a lot of things, oh, we face this problem. How do you actually validate this?
Yeah, I think it's going back to what I guess like this program YC mantra,
Yeah.
right? Do things that don't scale.
Yeah.
So like at the very beginning, before all the AI, before all the tech, right? We try to actually just act like a sourcing agent, but not like a traditional sourcing agent. We try to combine data and analytics, product recommendation with the final sourcing. Right. So basically on the back end, everything is manual, but then we ask our customer, okay, what are you looking for? You're looking for water tumbler, right? And then we will go out and then basically consolidate all these insights manually. Like what are people talking about on, Amazon about water tumblers, right? What are people talking about, let's say Instagram about, water tumblers. And then we combine all these insights together, look at what is trending, what is kind of up and coming, and then we use that as a basis to recommend certain products and manufacturers to our customers, right? And then we, by doing that, we also, of course, build in a little bit of margin for the work that we were doing. And then we just wanted to see, right, if people are willing to pay for it. And then I think at the end of the day, the answer was yes. And then we just, decided to, automate and try to productize the whole process, right? Because otherwise we would never scale. But then I think at the very beginning, doing things that don't scale was the only way to truly validate an idea.
Right. So basically, you manually source, I don't know, like from Amazon and all these, collected those data source and then just generated insights and then share with your clients or prospects and then just see whether they would pay.
A little bit more than that. So what we did is that we go to all these sites, right? And then we actually, collect all this data manually. And then we use those data points to suggest certain product features as well as new products to our customers, right? And then we build in all these, product features next to the data point that we found. And then we use this as kind of like a guided, I would say, curation, right? To help our customers make the right decision. So that's what we did. And of course, everything was pretty manual back then. We had to like literally go to the different e-commerce sites, look at the, sales data, look at what is, considered a top seller over there, and then try to, capture everything on a, Excel sheet, and then, do all these analysis, one by one, and then finally find the right product to recommend to our customers. So like, that was what we did. And then when we recommend those, products that we believe would be top selling to the customers, we build in a margin, right, for our recommendation. So meaning like, let's say the product costs $5, the logistics costs $5. We just charge our customer $11, right, in total. And then the extra $1 is basically the payment for our intelligence. Right. So like we try to monetize it this way, and then we realize, oh, actually people are paying for it. Right? And if people are paying for it, it means only one thing, right? Like we are probably adding more than $1 of value to them. And that's why they are willing to pay $1 to us. Right. So like I think that was how we validated the product market.
Right. Okay. I'm sure you get asked about this question a lot, but I'm just curious, like, when you recommend, let's say, a new product to someone, the way that I'm thinking about the ROI is when I launch this product, it's gonna, either go viral or a lot of people are gonna buy it, become best sellers. Like, how do you measure this ROI? Because from the recommendation for me to manufacture the product, to selling, to getting traction and all this, then I only know whether the product they recommended works or not. Like, from that angle point of view, like, do you see a lot of pushback or, in terms of the ROI that they can get based on the recommendation?
That's a really good question. And the way our customers think about it, right, is from a portfolio standpoint, right? Because they understand that there's no perfect algorithm that can predict consumer demand 100%, right? As sophisticated as our AI is today, right? Like there will be, some instances when our recommendations don't sell. The way they think about it is, are we on average increasing their probability of being right? So like, what at the end of the day, we're trying to add value, right? Is to lower the risk of being wrong. So like a lot of this, social media and e-commerce data that we have collected, are basically the first step of validating a product idea. And then if we already validate this idea once, then our customers have a much higher confidence level, that it could potentially be a top seller, right? And then after that, we also have a set of like, other, offline workflow automation, whereby we negotiate with the manufacturers to really lower the MOQ. We try to lower down the unit price. And then all these together, right, are basically lowering the risk of being wrong for our customers. So they are much more confident when they are launching a new or a new SKU, right? And I think, this is more a reflection of where the retail and e-commerce sector is going. So like, of course, this company Shein, right? And Shein launched around 2 million products in 2024. And,
2 million products SKU
in 2024.
Whoa,
yes. Compared to Zara that launched around 30,000. Right. So we are talking about a factor of around 60 times difference. And the reason why they do that is because they know for sure out of the 2 million products, many of them are not going to sell, right? But they would rather launch more and then look at the actual transaction data, and then, basically double down on the winner, right? That they feel like are going to become a top seller. So that's exactly what we do. Basically we provide our service almost like, Shein as a service, right? So like we do all these upfront data analytics work so that, out of all the SKUs that you launch are most likely going to be more successful. And then once you launch them, we can then help you double down on the winner, right? And the risk is minimized because for your experimentation, for your POC, we lower down the MOQ and the unit price to the bare minimum, right? So like this way, our customers can experiment with a lot of product in tandem, and then, look at the actual transaction data and decide which ones they want to double down.
I love the perspective that you, instead of, being right all the time, you lower the risk of being wrong and increase the probability of being right. Of course, there are many things. You consolidate everything together. You talk to the manufacturers, reduce the MOQ. So time spent definitely got reduced a lot. I love this angle of providing value to your customers. Like what happened next after they found a bestseller product? Do they come back to you, hey Karl, I have found a winning product from your suggestion. Do you help them scale?
Absolutely. And I think, the e-commerce world is moving into a much more fragmented type of model, right? Meaning like, yes, you may find a top seller, you still want to add more, and basically hit multiple, jackpots, right? Rather than just, sticking to one. So what we do is we would then, of course, help them scale their production. So for some of our customers, they may first start with like, let's say 100 units of a certain product, and then they will grow into 1,000 and then 10,000 units, right? But then at the same time, in addition to just growing the quantity for this particular winning SKU, we are still recommending more and more, other new products, right, to the customer, so that they can, exploring, experimenting, and then add to their, hero product list. So that like, by the end of the first year, right, let's say working with Sourcy, they will have then 5 to 10 like winning products that they are really confident in. And that, it doesn't stop there, right? They will continue to, onboard new SKUs, because sometimes the trends come and go, right? Your hero product for year 1 may not be a hero product for year 2. So you want to keep the engine running, continue to discover new trends, launch new products, and then, have your hero product list, right, with always the latest and the most up end.
And that is how you keep the retention. Keep
Exactly.
people using okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was about to ask, right?
Yeah,
I was about to ask, if I use your platform and I got a winning product and say goodbye, Karl, like when that happen, the retention thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like, the beauty of the categories that we are focusing on is that, it's very fragmented.
Okay.
So you can't really rely on just one product, and it's like kind of churning, and the trends are changing very quickly, right? So the brands have a very constant product discovery, and that's exactly our product.
Wow, awesome. Going back to your your journey, right? Because you started from a consulting background and also investing at IFC as a VC. You have seen the startup world from two sides of the tables, right? One from the investors, and now you are the founder. Like, how did your time as a VC shape how you approach building Sourcy?
Well, you know what? At the very beginning, I thought that was my unfair advantage, because I had that like VC angle, right, that I could bring in. But then it turned out to be my biggest challenge at the very beginning, and it was the biggest challenge that I had to overcome, right? With a lot of painful lessons learned. Being a VC, you're very theoretical, right? You're basically thinking about very macro stuff, right? What is the TAM? What is the, inflection point? What is the, market tailwind for this business model? Why now? Why this team? All these like very theoretical questions, right? But then as a founder, and especially in the early stage, you need to be extremely empirical, right? Everything that makes sense on a PowerPoint deck may or may not make sense in the real world, right? So like, there's only one way to find out, which is to experiment, right? So you need to be very empirical. You need to challenge all your assumptions, and then you need to do things that don't scale, right? As we were saying. And then I think like at the very beginning, I spent way too much time planning and thinking about the potential, TAM, product market fit, all these things. But then, I think like 6 months into my journey, I realized, okay, I need to throw all of these away and then think about, how can I really find a customer that will pay for my product, right? And the only way to do that is to be very empirical, talk to the customers, test the assumptions, validate the hypotheses with real data.
What was the point where you realized, shit, I gotta, take off my VC hat and then just really do the empirical stuff? Like, what point do you realize this?
I think it was back in our kind of like early days. I think the business model was a little bit different from today.
Okay.
So back then, when I identified this gap, right, of product curation and product recommendation, I thought about, using a slightly different solution to solve this problem. And that was by benchmarking, some of the successful American companies, right? And then there was this company called Fair. They are still very successful today. They are a $14 billion company. What they do is build a marketplace between all these boutique brands and the long tail small retailers, right? And then you have a lot of like basically small scale brand and retailers on both sides. And then you're trying to take away the discovery risk of the retailer so that they can then onboard more and more new brands. And it made total sense on paper that we need a fair for Asia. And that was also my hypothesis, right, at the very beginning. So like the first iteration that we were building, we were trying to have this like fair for Asia model. And then at the end of the day, there was no product market fit, right? So like we didn't get a lot of traction. And I think I, at the time, was still a little bit stubborn. And then I thought that, okay, theoretically speaking, right, it just made total sense. Why would it be not working in the real world? And then finally, after a lot of experimentations, after a lot of kind of like, customer interviews, I realized what we were pushing was not what the customers are looking for, right? So why would I try to, force fit, a market, a business model from a totally different market to Southeast Asia where we operate, right? So like finally, I just decided that, okay, let's forget about the theory. Let's forget about what might make sense on a PowerPoint deck, right? Let's try to focus on solving a real problem that our customers have and try to be, empirical. Listen to the customers, test our assumptions.
Love it. So essentially, when the V1 was like you copy what happened in the West, right? What was the competitor name? Flair.
Fair. Faire.
Faire. And then you try to use a similar model in Asia, and then realize that shit, actually is this not what people wanted? And then that's when you really turn on the founder mode and do things that don't scale, right?
Absolutely. And it was a very painful kind of like realization, right? Because we wasted almost like 6 months or more.
And you raised the money back then already? Yeah, like when you were doing the V1 thing.
Yeah, so we got some angel checks, right?
Okay.
But we didn't raise a round or anything. So like it was also a bit of bootstrapping and my own, personal savings and things like that. And of course, right, like I would, hope that we find product market fit right away and then we can raise a seed round. But then, I was a little bit too stubborn and then tried to push for a model that just didn't work in the markets that we operate in. And that's when, that aha moment came, right? Like I really need to be very, very empirical.
Got it. So you started, if I'm not wrong, you started Sourcy in November 2021, is that?
Around that time, like I would say September, like Q4, like give or take 2021.
Okay. And then you spent the first 6 months really like hammering the wall with the V1 approach, right? The idea.
Exactly.
And then you also raised some money from there. And after that, you spend the next 6 months pivoting, changing, testing ideas. When you really find that the problem was validated, do you just go on and raise a seed round, or how does the timeline work?
Well, so interestingly, even before we so-called found our product market fit, right, we got an incoming term sheet from a VC. It was like very early in 2022, right? Like, and if you remember, in 2021, 2022, it was not that hard to raise money.
Easy
And
money.
then, I think the work that we had already done, and then also with my background and the background of the founding team, like people just felt like, okay, maybe it's a solid team, right? So like we just got an incoming term sheet. And at the time, I actually turned it down because like I felt like, okay, we are gonna hit, a much bigger milestone very soon, right? And then I will be able to raise at a much higher valuation, right, very soon. So I actually turned it down. And then, of course, you know what happened? The capital market turned upside down, right? So like, even though we then, invest the next few months developing really good traction, like get a lot of like good customer testimonials, like, finding our real product market fit, we couldn't raise our round, right? In that kind of like rock bottom of the market. And then we finally raised our so-called seed round, or pre-seed round, actually, in 2023.
Early 2023.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And do you raise any more after that? Or this is the only round that you
Well,
raised?
so we also just very recently closed a small round. So like we call that round as pre-seed round now. And then the round that we just closed, we call it a seed or pre-A round. Sometimes the naming is also very confusing for me. But since we are also raising from US investors, right? So we're trying to follow the US kind of like terminology. So like back then I call our first round the seed round, right? And then I call our next round the pre-A round. But then apparently in America they have a little bit of a negative connotation to pre-A. They feel like you're not, using your seed money intelligently, right? And now you need a bridge. So like they would much rather you call your first round a pre-seed, and then your second round a seed, right? And then your next round should be, at your early growth stage, a Series A, right? So it's interesting how I had to almost like change the name of the round just because I am talking to different investors.
Okay. Well, by the way, congrats, man, for your recent fundraise.
Thank you.
In this super tough market, not easy, but super excited for that. You mentioned a lot of things, right? V1, it flopped, didn't work out, and it pivoted, and then a lot of things that you talk about. I just want to know what's really the toughest moment in the whole Sourcy's journey so far? Maybe a product flop, or maybe a decision that you make, or maybe if any, right, a near death experience, right? What that you haven't talked about this publicly before? Is there any like toughest moment when you're building Sourcy so far?
I would say so. I would say when back in 2022, right? I was saying like I turned down this term sheet, and then we just focus on execution. And then by the time we finally found product market fit, right, we couldn't raise any money because like no one in late 2022 was writing a check, literally. Like every
US or Asia? US or Asia?
In Asia.
In Asia.
At the time, we were just focusing on Asian investors, and then you probably remember that time, right? Like everyone was like very, very risk averse. Like, the market was, turning upside down. Overall market sentiment was very, very negative. And then, I couldn't raise a round, in 2022. And then, I already invested, my life saving into the company, right? So like, in 2022, I, literally had to, use my credit card to, make payroll. And then I had to, borrow some money from my wife, from my mother, just to continue the company running. Of course, later on we raised our seed, right? So finally, we were no longer in kind of financial difficulties, but like back then it was really, really tough.
How do you navigate that?
I think honestly, I thought about giving up, and like it was very, very difficult, right? Because like imagine when I was convincing my wife that I was gonna start a company, right? Like I had to tell her that I really know like it's gonna work, right? Like I have a lot of confidence. And then fast forward in around a year's time, I had to borrow money from her, right? So like it was a really, really, I would say, difficult time. And then I just asked myself, right, at the end of the day, is there product market fit? Right. So meaning, are customers willing to use our product, and are they willing to pay for it? And then I think the answer was a very clear yes. And we worked so hard, right, to get from a no to a yes for our product market fit. I just couldn't, give up at that particular moment. So like, we persevere, and then, we just continue to refine our business model. We were able to make some revenue, to cover a bit of the expenses, so that like, finally our financial kind of like standing improved. And then 1 year later, we got our seed, so like or pre-seed, whatever you call that. So like I think that's how I navigated that. But if you ask me again, right, I don't have like any kind of like playbook or anything like that I can share. It was like really great and resilience.
It was pretty dark, right? Because running out of money, and then it's like, okay, just trust me once more time again, and then we're gonna make it work, right? And
Yeah.
it just bounce back. It's really uncertain. So,
But I think what got me going
Yeah.
was really like the positive feedback from the customers,
Okay.
right? Because like I could see that we were solving the right problem, and our customers really relied on Sourcy, right? And then I think that just gave me the confidence to keep going. Imagine if I didn't have any customer, right? I would
Yes.
probably have given.
How do you feel when? Because I read one of your LinkedIn posts, right? You mentioned that one of the VC actually called your what you were doing back then, or the business, right, boring. And what was going through your head back then? And how did that rejection, actually change your approach, or did that change any?
I would say that was still very early, right? And then at the time, to be very honest, I didn't know exactly what I was doing. So like I think my confidence level was very low, right? And then when I heard a comment like that, right, I think it really triggered my own insecurity. And then I would think that maybe I was really not good enough, right? Or maybe the idea that I had was really not good enough, or maybe the traction, the business that we had built, even though it was very, very hard, maybe it was just not good enough. So I think that just really, triggered a lot of insecurity and anxiety in me. And I would say finally, right, it went back to exactly the same point. We got positive customer feedback, right? And that's what. And then I think in hindsight, being a very boring business is really a blessing in disguise. And that's because like we don't have a lot of this, right? And imagine if I was like building something in crypto back in 2021, right?
Yeah.
Like there would be like 200 other founders doing exactly the same thing. So being kind of like the only one pursuing the boring idea gave us a little bit of that luxury to focus on building the right product, right? To try to really focus on the product market fit rather than just like try to compete with other players on the pricing. So I think in hindsight it was a great thing, but then at that particular moment, right, when I heard that, of course I would say I was a bit hurt.
Yeah.
I felt a bit insecure, I guess, like back then. But now if people call my idea boring, I would be like, okay, that's amazing. It means that I probably don't have a lot of competitors in the short term.
I love how you are always circling to this PMF, to things that don't scale, and then really solving problems for your customers, give them what they want, positive feedback, and then all this is really what drove you and got you going when time got tough, right? Whether investors didn't really care, or whether money was running out, it all boils back to, okay, are we actually solving a real problems? Do our customers find our solution useful and keep coming back, right?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, starting a company, right, is exactly to do that.
Yeah.
You're trying to build a product that add values to your customers, right? So like if we are able to do that, regardless of everything else, we should keep going.
You mentioned also a few things about this, right? Like you are probably the only one that's solving this boring problem, this boring industry. A VC question would probably be why can't your other competitors like do the same thing? Like why can't other people do the same thing, right? Like what would your answer to that? What would be your answer be to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think today, right? Fast forward to today, I would say there are some startups, some in, Silicon Valley, right? That are trying to do something somewhat similar. But I think our strongest advantage over a lot of these Silicon Valley companies is that we are very deeply rooted, right, in Asia. So like we have team members from, China to Indonesia to Thailand to, Vietnam. So like we can source from a much wider network of suppliers with a much deeper relationship, right, with these suppliers. So like compared to, someone trying to do, this business model from, let's say the United States, I do feel like we have a very clear advantage. And then on the flip side, compared to, other Asian startups, I also feel like we do have, some advantage here. One is that we have a very international team and we have a very international team since day one. Right. So I think thanks to my experience in that like Lauder program that I was telling you about, as well as the IFC, I was trained to, operate well across different cultures, across, country borders and things like that. So I think that helped me set the team culture right, in the early days. So now we are a very collaborative company, even though we have team members from, very, very different cultures. So I think that also set us up for our success so far, because by definition, our business model is global and international. And then I would say another advantage that we do have is we have a lot of these like kind of like innovation around AI. And of course, everyone is trying to do something in AI right now. But I would say our technology is pretty advanced in the sense that we're using some of these like latest graph RAG technology, meaning we organize all the different data points in a knowledge graph, in a graph database, and then we have a very smart retrieval system, right, that can retrieve the right data to answer the right question. And thanks to our relationship with our investor in the City University of Hong Kong, we also get access to some of the latest and most, let's say, state-of-the-art research in this particular area. So I think all these together, right, do give us a bit of an unfair advantage to carry out this business model better than other startups might be able to.
Right. Do you also do sourcing for, let's say, US brands?
We do, and it's kind of a new development for Sourcy actually. As I was telling you, right, like with all the noise around the tariff, we actually get a lot of leads coming from the US. It seems like a lot of the US brands are trying to, develop slightly more differentiated products, right, so that they can then have the pricing power to pass on the tariff to the consumers. So I would say we just looked at the leads and then we realized, oh, why all of a sudden we have a lot of like these like Americans trying to work with us. And then after talking to some of them, we realized, okay, this might be a once in a lifetime type of opportunity, right? All these uncertainties that are on the market right now is the strongest tailwind for our business model, because we are there to build trust, to ensure quality, ensure the cost is optimized, right? So like this is actually our opportunity to go to the US. So now we do work with some American companies as well.
Love it. And your moat, basically, if I want to summarize that, is the relationship that you guys have built with the local suppliers, the manufacturers and all this. It's really hard for someone to come in and just, hey, we also do sourcing, right? Let's come to us. So this is one relationship. Second is the tech, the AI mode, from the data that you are collecting, and keep building the knowledge graph and make it even better, from the retrieval. I just want to learn more about that part of thing, right? Because I think you give a very good analogy that Alibaba, right, is like the Google of sourcing. Everyone, when they want to do drop shipping or whatever, go to Alibaba, buy the cheap stuff, come here, up the price, get the margin, stuff like that. You can always find the right product if you spend enough time just Googling, right? And you have also compared, on the side, you have also compared Sourcy as like a ChatGPT for sourcing instead of Google. What does that actually look like under the hood, right? How does AI turn someone's random idea into a factory-ready product?
At the end of the day, the art is smart retrieval, right? So what that means is that we have organized all our data in a way that would make sense to the AI, right? So like when you think about it, let's say if you want to launch a new water tumbler, there might be a tick post, right, about certain, water tumbler features that consumers are not happy about. There might be certain Amazon reviews, right, on some of the top selling, tumblers that showcase some of underserved needs, right? And then, of course, you also have factory data on, what are some of the latest materials that is used, right? Some of the latest specs. And then you have the customer query coming in, right? What are they trying to develop? What is their price point? And then these are all very fragmented and disjointed data. And what we have done is we have this knowledge graph that can connect everything together, right? So like when you come in and then say, oh, now I want to develop the next gen water tumbler catering to Gen Z consumers, then we can retrieve exactly the relevant insights, the relevant, manufacturers, kind of like specs, and then combine everything together, right? So like, we will be able to tell you, okay, if you're targeting Gen Z, you need to use very vibrant and very maximalist type of color and design, right? And then we have all the materials that can satisfy exactly that use case. And then we also have like all these insights about, oh, consumers are looking for this and that feature. Maybe they want to have, a slightly lower weight so that it's more portable, but they still want to have like, let's say, 750 mil of capacity, right? So like then we can also identify the relevant data from the factory side that can fulfill that, right? So that connection between demand data and trend data with supply data and kind of material data is our biggest innovation. So like once we have a query coming in, right, we will be able to retrieve the most relevant data points and then fit it back to the customer, right, with almost like a ChatGPT type of experience. And that like data pre-processing, pre-indexing, and retrieval is really where our core innovation lies.
Right, and they can just do this through the chat interface, I suppose, like just chat and then ask what they want, and then that's it.
Absolutely. So when you input a query, what happens is like number one, our AI will retrieve the most relevant demand data, right? And then organize everything and synthesize everything in a way that you can easily understand. And then the user can cherry pick, right, from all these different features that we recommend. Some of the ones that, they feel like are the most important to them and their target consumers. And then once they select those features, right, there will be a sourcing request that's automatically created on our backend. And then our AI would then again look at that sourcing request, the requirement, and compare that with, tens of thousands of manufacturers' catalog out there. And then shortlist and cherry pick the best option that can fulfill this manufacturing requirement. Think about it like before Sourcy, in order to do that, you might need two armies of interns, right? The first army of interns is focusing on collecting all the data points from social media, e-commerce sites, etc. And then the second army is focusing on comparing what you want with the hundreds of thousands of catalogs that you get, right, from all these different manufacturers. So like that's very inefficient. And not only is it inefficient and very expensive and slow to do, you also don't know, right, if the people you hire are doing it well. But with Sourcy, we do it with AI, and we can do it at scale, and we have a lot of like transparency throughout the process, so you can know, okay, why is the AI selecting this manufacturer but not that manufacturer, right? Everything is clearly documented, and all these are pretty, groundbreaking, as you were saying, for the sourcing industry.
And for that to happen, you have to liaise and onboard, I guess, with like hundreds of suppliers to your platform, so that you can always have access to their most updated catalog, all the pricing and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, so we see ourselves as a consolidator, right? So like meaning all these suppliers on the different sourcing sites from Alibaba to, let's say, PHGate to like HKTBC to like madeinchina.com, we have already consolidated them. And then we have a supply communication tool, right, that can actually talk to the suppliers to collect the data. And then once those data is collected, we can then load it to the database so that we will always have an up-to-date and real-time supplier database. And it's very different compared to some of the other, I would say, platforms out there that rely on the factory's voluntary update of information, right? Because like one pain point that people have when they are using some other sourcing sites out there is they go to these sourcing sites, they ask the manufacturer, oh, can I have that product? And then the factory will say, oh, this model is from 2 seasons ago, right? Now is the new catalog for you. Like that's just very inefficient, right? And then now our customers don't have to go through that process. Our client communication tool can always collect the latest data, right, and load it to our database, which is the knowledge graph that I was talking about. And then when a query comes in, then we can always cherry pick from the latest and most up to date.
Right. So you always have to get your e-com sites data, social data updated. And then when query comes in, just get to your database, and then retrieve the right info, make the right suggestion.
Exactly.
I think this actually reminds me of another startup, not exactly the same space, but like, I think I also mentioned to you before, called AI Pellets. Yeah, I don't know whether they also do the end step, the final step, which is manufacture the product and send it to their customers. This one I'm not too sure, but they focus on the consumer package good product, CPG industry, to help big enterprises predict the next food trend based on the data points that they analyze, right, on social and all this, and then give them the prediction on what potential products to launch next. Yeah. And but their customers are more focusing on the US side of thing. I guess one question that I just thought of is when I asked, because he's my friend, right? The co-founder of AI Palette. And I think one thing that I learned from him is they also started out in Asia in the very beginning. But then after that, they realized that it is really hard to sell in Asia. And then when they moved to the US, everything just seemed very easy to sell their product, for enterprises, right? Enterprises. But whereas for you, you started in Asia, got everything right, and then now you expanded to US, which is a bit different, right? What is your thought on the difficulty of selling to customers in Asia? Because for you, you focus on Asia, if I'm not wrong, and then is that the same difficulty that you face when you're selling to your customers here, or is a different customer segment that you guys are targeting?
Yeah. So first, like Asia is big, right? And also Southeast Asia itself is also very diverse. We see mixed success in Southeast Asia. I would say the Philippines, for example, is a very interesting market. It doesn't have the highest per capita GDP. But if you look at per capita spending and also the spending per dollar of GDP, they are amongst the highest in Southeast Asia. So actually, like somehow, like even though some Filipinos may not make a lot of money, they are willing to spend, right? And when the consumers are willing to spend, then you have a vibrant consumer market, right? So like where there you can launch a lot of niche and premium products and still make pretty good margin, pretty good money, right? Whereas for some of the other Southeast Asian or Asian countries, like for example Indonesia, it's a totally different game. It's all about like value for money, a very price sensitive country, I would say. And therefore, like we also need to kind of already localize our offering, right? Depending on the country that we operate in, even within Southeast Asia. And then for the US, it's a totally different market. The consumer spending is way higher, even much higher than, of course, like the Philippines and the like. But at the same time, the requirement is also much higher, right? So like in terms of the certifications, in terms of the sustainability concerns, in terms of the like requirements around like factory audits and things like that, right? They just have a much higher bar, especially for the enterprise segments. So I would say, all in all, the way we think through this kind of like market expansion question is where we have the strongest product market fit, right? And we're going to start there. We're going to become the winner there. And then we expand, right, to the next one, and then to the next one, to the next one. So now that we have a pretty good kind of like stronghold in Southeast Asia, I think it's about time for us to really take the US market very seriously and then try to, localize and customize our value proposition slightly there to hopefully, get to our product market fit. So that's one of our top priorities. for 2025.
Wow, gonna be super exciting. That means you also have to travel very often now to the US and set up the office and get a team right and all this.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
I honestly, I have been
Yeah.
traveling nonstop. Like I was just in
Yeah.
the US for 2 weeks, and then I
Yeah.
came back to Asia. I came back to Hong Kong, and then I flew to Manila right away, and then I came back to Hong Kong, and I went to Shenzhen, and then I went to Singapore, and then I just flew back to Hong Kong yesterday night, and then
Yeah.
now this afternoon, as I'm telling you, I'm going to Shenzhen
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Like tomorrow or today?
This afternoon, because
This
like I just
afternoon
want
just
to
came back.
like
Okay.
set up the office,
Yeah.
making sure everything is in order.
Right. Okay. Well, love it. Like, let's zoom out little bit, right? You talk about all the journey and all these. Looking back, right? You mentioned one mistake, which is the V1 that you built, right?
Hmm.
There was a mistake because you kind of like force fed the thing to the people, without really solving their problems. What are the other two mistakes that you would think you have made throughout this whole journey?
Yeah, I would say number one is I trusted people, and by people I meant partners, right? Like so
Hmm.
other companies too early,
Hmm.
and then I didn't budget in a lot of contingency, right, in the
Hmm.
early days. So like for example, I can give you two very quick interesting anecdotal
Yeah.
examples here. Our customers depend on us, right, to meet their requirements, and when you think about it, like if there is a delay, even if it is not caused by Sourcy, our customers are going to be very disappointed. There were two incidents that happened, one in Indonesia and one in Mexico, actually, that almost cost us all our reputation. Basically, in Indonesia, we are working with one of the largest direct-to-consumer brands over there for their new, product launch, and they were trying to launch some new performance socks, right? And then they even organized a whole event to announce and launch this new performance socks, and it was developed and sourced through Sourcy, right? And then all of a sudden, just like a few days before the event, our logistics partner, right, told us, oh, we might have to delay the shipment by a week. What that means is that our socks are gonna arrive after the launch event, and that just didn't work, right? So that we finally had to, like very last minute look for alternative, like find people who can, basically get the product from the port and then give it to our customers. And then the event was in the afternoon, and the sock finally arrived, right, in the morning. And a very similar incident happened for our Mexico customer. They are a coffee chain, so they launched a lot of these like packaging, right, with Sourcy. And for some reason, there was a very significant delay in the custom clearance process, right? And then our forwarder was not able to even take the product out from the port, and it was due to some of the kind of like low level errors on their side. And then our customers had to open up the coffee shop already, and the coffee cups are still not there. So like imagine if that really happened yet again, Sourcy would have to kind of bear all the responsibilities, right? So like what happened is we were able to identify kind of like another partner who went to the port, find our products, take it out, and then one day before the kind of the opening of the store, finally the cups arrived, right? So like these two incidents taught me one thing, which is that like I can't rely on an external party. I shouldn't trust an external party to always meet their commitment, responsibilities, and I always need to build in, right, some contingency plans. So like that's I think what I would say is one of the key mistakes that I made in the early days, right? So luckily both incidents didn't turn into a disaster, but I will just never make the same mistake again. I think another mistake that I can think of is hiring. In the early days, I just settled a little bit too early. So like let's say for a role that we wanted to hire for, I would basically interview maybe 3 to 4 people, and then when I saw someone that I think is kind of like good enough and is the best amongst the people that I have interviewed, I would just bring that person in, right? Even if kind of like deep down I know that person is not kind of like a star player, and then it just never kind of like went well if the hiring was done in that way. What I learned is that I'm not hiring for the best. I'm hiring for the right person, right? So like now, if I cannot find the right person, I will not try to pick the best one out of the people that I have interviewed and then just, settle with that. I will always delay, right, the hiring, postpone the hiring, and then keep looking until I find someone that I feel like, okay, this is the right person, right? Then that's when I will bring that person. So like, don't settling too early is very, very key because like every time if I settle too early, it turned into a big disappointment. And I would rather not hire than to hire someone who is not the right fit.
Let me just try to recap a bit because I think there are many wisdom there. So basically, first thing is never have a single source of failure. Try to make redundancy, right?
Yes.
Contingency plan and all these. Second thing is, instead of rushing to hire the best people, hire the right people that really fits the skill set, the culture, the purpose, and all this, right? On the hiring part, how do you know whether the person is right? Like, do you follow your gut feeling or do you have like a playbook for that? Because when you say right can be any definition.
So one thing that I have learned is
Yeah,
before you hire, you
yeah,
need to know very, very clearly what skill sets you're hiring for. In the early days, I just didn't think about it this way. I felt like, oh, I need a marketing person. So let me put a marketing kind of like JD out, and then I interview a bunch of people, and then I pick the best one among the available candidates. And then now what I would do is I would try to do that job myself first, get my hands dirty, like try to, learn as much as I can, right? So that I can really specifically point what are some of the skill sets that are required for that particular role. And then once I know that, then I specifically go after people who have these skill sets. They may or may not be the best on paper, but they will be the best fit, right, for what we need right now. And of course, I can't do it for every single thing. For example, I'm not a developer, right? And it would be much harder for me to try to kind of like do the developer job myself first. So what I would do there is I would then ask my tech person to do that, right? So like to try to do the job first and then try to pinpoint very specifically what are some of the skill set gaps that we're trying to fill. And then sometimes the skill gap itself can be quite general, right? Meaning like we need someone who is creative and we need someone who is flexible. And maybe we don't have anyone that's creative enough on our team, someone who's flexible enough on our team, right? Then we will specifically go after, someone who is creative, someone who is flexible in ideas, right? So like the skill gap that I mentioned is not necessarily a hard skill sometimes. It can be a soft skill, but still you need to understand very clearly what you're looking for. Otherwise, it will almost always turn into a failure.
I like the fact that you actually try something first before you outsource because when you try something, you know the problem, the pain points, the nitty gritty stuff. Then you go and find the people, right? Instead of putting out a general JD, hey, here's what I'm looking for, stuff like that. I think that could reduce the probability of being wrong.
And not only on the hiring part, right? By doing it yourself first, you can also manage that person better.
Yeah.
Because you now understand what are some of the difficulties, right, that person may face. And also you understand if that person is not telling the truth, right? Because like you have already done it. So I think that also helps not only with the hiring, but the management.
Got it. So given this wealth of experience that you have, building Sourcy, for the aspiring founders or even current founders out there, who is listening now, and maybe they are sitting on a so-called boring idea that they are thinking to start sometime soon. Like, what is the one piece of advice you would give to them before they start?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say, of course, right? As I was mentioning, boring can be a blessing in disguise, so don't get discouraged by that. But the actual advice that I would give is to validate your ideas as quickly as you can, right? And forget about all the theories, right? And all the logics behind the idea. Like you can be the most logical person, that came up with the most theoretically sound idea, and it can still be wrong, right? So like I think what is important is validation. And right now there are a lot of like AI tools that can help you build a landing page, build a even a functioning app, right?
Yeah, lovable, all this.
Yeah,
App.
Replit, all
Yeah.
these like things like that, like
Yeah.
and you can really do vibe coding, right? So like you can really like just within a day or two
Yeah.
build a micro MVP that can help you validate your ideas,
Yes.
right? And I think do that right away. Like whatever idea you might have in your mind, just spend a weekend, right? Build a more or less functioning mini app.
Yeah.
Put it out there. Maybe put like $50, right, as ads, and then just get people to come to try to use it, and then see if you are really solving the right problem before you do anything.
100%, man. Like I've also talked to so many aspiring founders. Me included, I actually make this mistake many times. And a lot of aspiring founders that I talk to nowadays, a lot of them, they almost always went into the build mode to build a lot of features and things like that before even validating whether the problem is real or painful that or people are willing to pay. And usually they spend like 3 to 6 months or even a year plus to like only to realize that actually is an imaginary problem that they thought people want to have. But yeah, I think validation is really something that I also keep reminding myself actually whenever I do things now. Hey, let's validate first, right? I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but let's validate it. That was the quickest and cheapest way to do it.
There's only one way to find out, which is to get customers to use it. It's like once you get customers to use it, you're gonna learn a lot. Sometimes you're gonna learn something totally different, right? So like you realize, oh wow, like actually the problem exists, but it's slightly different from what you thought it was, right? Then you can pivot very quickly. But then I would say right now with all the AI tools, there's really no good excuse not to validate your idea.
Yeah.
You can do that over a weekend, right? So like just force yourself to validate it first. You can do all the building, all the ideation after you validate the idea, right? But then validate the idea first.
100%. Well, thanks so much for sharing. I really appreciate your all the raw and valuable insights of building Sourcy from day one. Like where do people or our listeners find you online if they want to follow up or reach out to you with some questions?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is LinkedIn. So I try to check my LinkedIn messages from time to time. The easiest way would be that, and then maybe also just email. My email is karlchan@sourcyglobal.com. Right, so also pretty easy to remember.
Cool. And how can our listeners be useful to you?
Yeah, I think if you ask me, like what we need is product feedback and more customers, right? So if you're listening, please go to trends.sourcy.ai, try out our trend analytics tools, and then if you like what you see over there, refer Sourcy to your friend who might be building a new e-commerce product. Then we can come in to help them.
Cool. By the way, trendy.sourcy.ai, right? Trends.sourcy.ai. I think that was the chatbot that I tried earlier.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, you can just go and try if you are curious like what Sourcy can do for you. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate your time here, and thank you so much for sharing every golden nuggets and wisdom that you have. I'm sure a lot of founders will, and even aspiring founders or people find this super solid and helpful to them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Admond. And I like this initiative a lot. Thanks so much for trying to build content for builders. Right? We really need more of this.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you, Admond. Bye bye.